You may be seated. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Shall I just start by saying, looking absolutely ravishing, exquisite, colorfully impeccable, splendid.
Thank you, Louis. That's exactly what I thought when I was buying this dress.
Well, actually, Kundai, I was talking about the ladies and gentlemen in the crowd.
Wow. And me, Louis, and me?
That said, I must say, Kundai, you do look stunning.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the launch of the Africa Gender Fund Initiative. We are so excited to welcome you here this evening at the Marriott in Kigali, Rwanda. My name is Kundai Ziumbe.
And my name is Louis Charema, and we have been tasked with hosting this evening's proceedings in launching the audacious, the exciting, momentous Africa Gender Initiative. We do hope you take a liking to our voices.
I'd like to start by acknowledging our guests of honor this evening, Her Excellency Mrs. Jeanette Kagame, the First Lady of the Republic of Rwanda, Her Excellency Mrs. Gracia Machel, Professor Senaid Fisheha, the board of the African Philanthropy Forum, and our pioneer cohort of the Africa Gender Initiative. We welcome you all today. Please give them a round of applause.
Thank you, Kundai. And so, let's get into it. What is the Africa Gender Initiative?
Well, the Africa Gender Initiative is a 10-year, bold, African-led initiative that will bring together African philanthropists and foundations to collaborate and to mobilize resources for gender equality. It's African-led, it's collaborative, and its mission is to create a world where African women and girls thrive. And I'm excited about that. What about you?
That's exciting, Kundai. Now, listening to Professor Sunait speak this morning, she spoke of some of the things we could do as African philanthropists. And she spoke about three things. I hope you can remember. The first one was investing in systems. The second one was investing in institutions. And the third one was investing in people. Now, the reason I'm particularly excited about this initiative is because it aims at addressing systemic change. Now, the second reason, Kundai, probably more personal to me, and I'm going to ask this as a question to the audience and hopefully get a response. And now I have an 18-year-old daughter who's just started university studying law, and I know exactly what she would say if I asked her this question. But here goes the question. Do you agree, because I certainly do, that if we had better representation in leadership positions, in spheres such as the legal sphere, economics, do we not think that certainly there'd be a lot less conflict in the world, possibly a lot more peace? Do we agree? Yes.
If those leaders were women, that's a resounding yes from me, yes. Three words that I've heard in every single plenary that we've listened to today are action, urgency, intention. And this evening, you're going to hear from an amazing lineup of phenomenal women who are taking deliberative, intentional steps to seeing and creating a better world for women and girls on the continent. But we're also here to celebrate, Louis, so I hope you brought your dancing shoes.
You have got no idea. I am ready to rock and roll.
All right, Louis, over to you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor of introducing our first speaker this evening. And given all of her work in the gender space, I'm personally thrilled, and I cannot wait to listen and learn from her address. Let me maybe say, first and foremost, she's a dedicated First Lady, a dedicated mother. She has invested in personifying the professional merit in strong family values, social grace that an empowered woman should aim for. Ladies and gentlemen, may you be upstanding as I have the honor of inviting Her Excellency, the First Lady of the Republic of Rwanda, Mrs. Janet Kagame.
Thank you. Your Excellency, Graça Machel, founder, Graça Machel Foundation. Your Royal Highness, Queen Sylvia Naginda, Professor Knight Fiseha, Director of Global Programs at the Susan Thompson Buffett Foundation, and my dear sister Tsitsi Masiwa, Chair of the African Philanthropy Forum. Honorable guests, good evening. How gratifying to be with you all this evening in Kigali. You embody the pulse of African philanthropy, and looking at you all, I believe that social injustice stands no chance against the resolve of our continent's children. However, not to dampen the mood, ladies and gentlemen, but I would like to begin by sharing with you a somewhat regrettable story. Picture this with me. It's about a girl. She was a normal, sweet child with great ambition, like many African children. Her boarding school was quite far from her home. And while the bus drove others to the school, it dropped her off halfway into the journey. She would then walk, come rain and shine, or go to her destination depleted, feet blistered, shaking with cold under sometimes wet clothes. And one day, she cut her feet on splintered branches on her trek to school. And she soon developed a fever and had to be hospitalized. The infection was so advanced that she was in need of lengthy treatment, but she was only prescribed half the treatment. The doctor claimed she was simply not entitled to the other pills despite needing them greatly. Some say the fever took her in her sleep, others that it drove her insane. But the details matter not, for all we know enough of this child's unfortunate story. And her name is Gender Gap. And she bears the face of this child's unfortunate story. The McKinsey Global Institute reported that the African gender parity score now stands at 0.58, and the gender gap is older than all of us and is set to outlive us all. The economic gender gap is forecast by the World Economic Forum to close in 150. I had this morning, Senate mentioned 132, and the Tsitsi 142, and me, I'm saying 150. All long enough for currently unborn children to have born great-great-great-grandchildren. We can only imagine how many women by then will have known a cycle of poverty and powerlessness from income disparity and financial dependency in their homes. How could we possibly tolerate a future so unwelcoming? The gender gap, like all structural oppression, can and does kill, and this is literally and metaphorically. But fortunately, with dedicated advocacy and financial resources, with tireless efforts from greater education, with equal empowerment of our boys and girls, this gap can shrink to nothing less. To echo the words of my friend, Professor Senait, what she said in this very room this morning, we must invest in individuals, institutions, and systems. This is the groundwork to the real revolution in gender parity that we require, the sustainable impact that might allow us to dream of a world where philanthropy will only be about the love for people and no longer the need to save people. Dear guests, today this country refuses to allow its women and girls to be unloved, unprotected, and unheard. Rwanda grants equal land ownership and inheritance to women in legal marriages and equal inheritance rights to daughters and sons. But we know the journey ahead is lengthy. This awareness has led to many gains for women's rights, for instance, 30% female quota in all decision-making positions, 61% women legislators in parliament, 58.6% women civil servants, and 50% female judiciary. Gender-responsive budgeting in both the public and private sectors. Today, in Rwanda, equality as a principle, and gender equality in particular, has been an important mitigator of the gender gap. Therefore, I believe that many of you may understand that the beginning of my foundation, Imbuto Foundation, had to draw inspiration from the new dawn of our nation. We have, together with our partners, come a long way in providing some effective solutions to these issues, and I dare say more. From our very first day as a foundation, we had the fortune of living in a country that had traced its pathway to success to a more inclusive, progressive, harmonious, and equal society. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, the $50 million that the African Gender Initiative aims to raise over the next decade is to be applauded and could even be exceeded, and why not? There is no price tag to the liberation of women, and in particular, their financial freedom. Today, we can build a time machine together. We can bring 2172, the year where women are economically equal to men at last, to a much nearer and a more immediate future. It may seem like an ambitious ask, but it is possible. With appropriate policies and legal framework, with determined political will, with collaboration between philanthropies and governments, with beneficiary involvement at the core of strategy design, when we gather again 10 years from today to celebrate the impact of the African Gender Initiative, I guarantee you that our commitment will have been worth every single effort. Congratulations, dear Sister Tsitsi, Chair of the APF, for showing unwavering commitment in bettering the future of our daughters. Your kind words this morning showed that underneath your fiery passion for female empowerment exists pure love. Pure love for your sisters. In your determination, all of us here can draw faith that gender parity is ours to claim, ours to live. I thank you and the APF board for having me here to join you in this crucial initiative of the AGI to secure the financial future of women and, by extension, of society. I wish you a wonderful evening and a lovely dinner.
Your Excellency, thank you so much for your words. You honor us with your presence here this evening. And as you said, when it comes to social injustice, it stands no chance against our African children. I'm excited to enter the time machine with you to 2072 and to bring that future closer, here, today, now, with these people gathered in this room. Now, today we've heard a lot of people speak, and they've said some really memorable things. So I want to ask a few people in the room Do you remember what I'm going to call a quotable quote? And I'll start us off. The first one that I'll give: stop the pilotitis. Scale, scale, scale. Anyone remember that one? Do we know who delivered it? Can I get a volunteer? Any volunteers in the audience who have a similar quote that they'd like us to remember as we go into day 2? Any volunteers? We've got one at the table over there.
The first thing is the policy of intention.
Mm-hmm. Any volunteers on this side of the room? Everyone's trying to remember what the quote was. All right. We'll try this again tomorrow. How about that in the morning session? Remember your quotable quote, go and read through your notes, come tell me one. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the pleasure of inviting to the stage this evening Theo Soa. Theo Soa was the former CEO of the African Women's Development Fund. She's currently the co-chair of the Equality Fund, and she's an advisory board member of the Co-Impact Gender Fund. Before she comes all the way up, I do want to tell you a short story about Theo. Sorry to make you stand. 10 years ago, Theo delivered a TEDx talk about women's empowerment and education in Africa. And she told a story of a conference, similar to this one. Women, African women specifically, were at the center of the conversation. Critical decisions about African women were being made. But were there any African women in the room? Theo said no, there weren't. And why? When there were so many on the continent that could have come to tell powerful stories about why these issues are important. 10 years later, where is Theo? Here, at the APF conference. And how many African women are in the room? Give me a shout. If you're an African woman in the room, yes, a very different future made possible today. So I'm inviting Theo up today to lead us in a conversation with 2 phenomenal women about 10 years into the future, from today to 2032. What will the continent look like? What will we be able to achieve? What world will we be able to create through the Africa Gender Initiative? Please help me welcome Theo Soa.
Okay, so first of all, thank you to all of you for being here, and thank you to the APF for inviting me and for inviting so many people to join in this conversation and to join in the launch of the Africa Gender Initiative. Now, because I've never been known to stick to a rule in my life, instead of going forward, I actually want to start by taking us back, and then I'll introduce our 2 phenomenal African women powerhouses to you. The reason I want to take us back is because we're in this room, we're talking about African philanthropy. And I want to remind all of us that philanthropy is not something that is done to us as Africans. It is something that we as Africans have got instilled in all of our cultures from generations back. Just because we do not have the word philanthropy in many of our local languages doesn't mean that we have not been involved in philanthropic activity for centuries. In virtually every African country I have ever been to, I have been part of the solidarity that is built into our communications, part of the giving and the sharing that all African communities have been part of. And the heart of philanthropy really does have to be that solidarity, that standing next to and with people, that love for humanity, which expresses itself not just in money, but in time, in talent, in skills, and in demonstrating our love. So I'm taking us back in order to take us forward, because as long as we do not claim our narratives, our own African narratives around giving, around sharing, around philanthropy, then we actually allow ourselves to be looked on in such a way that our change is limited. We allow people to tell us that we are not transformative when we are. And so the two African women that I want to introduce to you today are extraordinary examples of what African women do and how they have made change and transformation happen, and how they have done this sometimes in extraordinarily challenging situations, but always with an understanding of the resilience of our continent, the strength of African women, and the visions that we and our grandparents and our great-grandparents have held, which have allowed all of us to move into these situations that we are in today. So could I please ask Madam Tsitsi Masiwa and Her Excellency Graça Machel to join me on the stage. I'm only going to do, can you hear me? Okay, I'm only going to do a very short introduction to these two women. You have their bios on your app, and I want to spend the time actually listening to them. But what I do want to say, and what I hope you will all join me in thanking them for, is the fact that they have grasped transformation on our continent by the hand. So, Tsitsi, you have been an extraordinary change maker. Your Higher Life Foundation, the work that you've been doing in linking Global South philanthropy to Global North philanthropy, the fact that you are chairing the APF, which is making a really concerted effort to crowd new and greater and more resourcing into the equity and justice initiatives that we want to see achieved. Can I ask you to thank Tsitsi? And then we have Mama Machel, who I actually don't even know where to start with, because
Simply don't start.
don't start. She says don't start. I have to start. People on the continent and elsewhere very often say to us, oh, women are our own worst enemies. And the way in which I always counter that is that that is someone's myth. Mama Machel has been a mentor, a guide, someone I've learned from all my life. And I know that it's not just me, but so many other African women who have stepped into leadership positions who would not be here if it wasn't for her. And at the same time, she has actually impacted on changing systems, both in her native country, Mozambique, across the African continent, but also globally. So can I ask you to join me in thanking Mama Machel?
This is so unfair. So unfair.
Okay. So we are going to talk about the African Gender Initiative as part of our conversation, but I wanted us to start by asking both these amazing women about your personal journeys into philanthropic action. What was the spark that made you think, actually, this kind of work, this kind of transformation is something that I want to be part of? Because to be frank and to be fair, no one ever has to take philanthropic solidarity action. It's a choice. So, Tsitsi, if I could start with you.
Thank you so much, and what a rare opportunity we have to be gathered in an environment like this one, and having Her Excellency Mrs. Jeanette Kagame support us in such a special way, and having Mrs. Marshall here with us, not only to share her wisdom, but to endorse what different generations are doing and continue to do to fight the injustices that many women face. My journey started with, I grew up in a very loving family, and loving in that there were always people coming in and out of the home, extended family members who were looked after. So I had many sisters and many brothers. And I believe there was just that impartation of generosity and kindness and a willingness to share. So as I grew older, my name is Tsitsi, and it means compassion. I just found myself always being very sensitive about the challenges that Africans would face in my own community. Then I got married to an entrepreneur who had really ambitious goals. And one day he came home and he said, you know what, I think we need to apply to the government to get a license to establish a mobile telephone business. And I said, go for it. He applied and he got a no. And then he decided to sue the government. And when I asked him, where do you get the guts to take the government to court? He says, I'm sure we've got a good court system. I said, how long do you think it will take between your application and a yes or a no? 4 months. So I said, okay, I think I can live for 4 months. Well, the battle lasted 5 years. And in the 5 years, we literally lost everything. During that time as well, this had started when I was in university, the HIV and AIDS scourge. I had seen my lecturers that I really loved and respected fall sick and die. My fellow classmates passed away, and then family members die, and I felt so helpless. It would cut right to the core of my heart that why do we have to die that way? And what can I do? So I guess the two seemed unrelated initially, but the harder things got because we're fighting for this legal battle. The more I began to do soul searching on, okay, if we were to establish this business, you can only sleep in one bed and drive one car. So what do you do if you were to have some resources available? And I made a personal decision. It's interesting, my husband Strive will also tell you he had his own personal journey, but my personal one was, I would like to provide scholarships for orphans. So we didn't wait to make money. It wasn't about money, it was about heart and about a mission and a vision that I personally was deeply convicted about. So we started philanthropy from my salary, because my husband had no salary. He was living off me then. I never cease to remind him. And when the media says he's worth, I don't know, X dollars, I just said, just remind them, divide by 2. So the journey for me was part of being in my DNA, is something that was part of our culture of giving and generosity. But also, I think the turning point was the HIV and AIDS scourge and losing people that I loved so much. and then started philanthropy from salary. By the time I learned the word philanthropy from the Rockefeller Foundation, I discovered, oh, so this is what philanthropy is, but it was something that was deeply ingrained in my heart and my mind.
Thank you. So I'll be coming back to you afterwards to ask a question about the movement from there to your passion for the African Gender Initiative. But first, Mama Michelle, what were the sparks for you?
I could say that I have a similar beginning, like what Siti was saying. I was born 3 weeks after my father had died. My mother had, with me, 6 children. Illiterate, peasant. We were, in material terms, a very poor family. But to cut the story short is, I learned from a very small child about the strength and the power of women from my own mother. My sisters were the ones then who supported my mother to bring us up, the younger ones. But education then became really a passion for me to understand. Either I do study and I get myself to a certain level, or I'll end up being like hundreds of girls I was playing with in my own village. I'll come back to this. But the philanthropy part, many of you might know that Mozambique had a very long conflict, internal conflict, for 16 years. During that time, I visited lots of refugees in Swaziland, in Zimbabwe, in Tanzania, and I really felt something here was just, I couldn't breathe with the kind of situations I have seen in these refugee camps and the situation of women and children particularly. But come the time where we signed the agreement, as a country we signed the agreement, and so we began the process of peace. We had about 2 million people outside the country. And we had lots of organizations, international organizations, which came to Mozambique to support. And it just became so strange to me to say, but why all these people are coming to help us? How do we help ourselves? How do we enact this natural way of sharing? Because for me, it's more sharing than giving. And I decided to leave government. And with a group of friends, we decided to establish an institution. At the time, we are not even clear how to call it. But we wanted an institution by Mozambicans, for Mozambicans, to mobilize the goodwill and the capacity which exists in our communities to say, look, this is a Mozambican problem. First and foremost, it has to be Mozambicans to tackle it. So we mobilize ourselves. In the meantime, the idea of a foundation came. Why a foundation, not an NGO, a simple NGO? We wanted to affirm and assert our independence. But we didn't have money. So we said, how do we start now? So I brought together about 18 with myself, we were 19 good friends. We said, look, let's get money from our own pockets. Let's establish the first seed of endowment of a foundation so that we'll have the moral and the dignity of going out there and ask for people to tap into what we have started, instead of just going to say, we want to establish a foundation, give us money. So really it was that idea, one of you see a challenge, you take responsibility, you find the institutional framework you're going to use of how to tackle a problem. But you are quite clear that you can't do it alone. You have a group of friends, and with this group of friends, then some of them, they had been in government like me, one of them Minister of Finances, so he was like the financial engineering of helping us to mobilize money. Guess what? Poor country as we were still, at the time, we mobilized from Mozambican hands, ordinary people, small businesses, and public servants. We were able to mobilize what came to become $1 million. It's nothing for people, but for us, it was really affirmation of what we wanted to do. So we wanted independence, and we wanted to be Mozambicans to make decisions with Mozambicans on how we tackled issues of bringing our citizens back home and work with them to start anew. That's how the Foundation for Community Development was born. Now it's 29 years old. It has become now the biggest, civil society organization in the country. And what I want to say for us here, it's for many of organizations which are here. We didn't start with money. No. We started with recognizing a challenge. And we recognize the challenge, and we take responsibility of how we can be part of the solution for that. So it comes from the idea. It's the idea. So ideas for us are part of what is called philanthropy. Second, the way you organize, even in your community, it's part of our way of doing philanthropy. Just the system, the institutional framework you put together, it's part of your way of doing philanthropy. While in other parts of the world, well, you have a company like the Ford, no? Ford is a company, right? They had lots of money, and they decided to take money and to establish the Ford Foundation, right? We have people who have lots of money, and they feel, oh, there is a cause I would like to support. They take part of the money, and then they put it there. The institutional framework is already there. In the US, you just establish a foundation, it is already, the rules have been established. In our case, we even have to draft what a foundation is in Mozambique, lobby the government to approve it. And so I want to emphasize that any one of us here can, in the face of a challenge which speaks to you so strongly, you can think about it, establish forms of tackling it institutionally, and then money is the last thing which comes. That's how we do. Whenever you have a very good idea and you share this good idea with, there will be people who are going to support you. But always they tap into your own first effort. And this is extremely important for Africans. And I don't want to be long on this, but you say where it started. From that point, you'll ask me, how did I establish, the institution, Zizile, for, in Portuguese we say primeira infância. How do you say in English? I don't know. Early child development, for early child development. Why did I establish Graça Machel Trust? All the institutions which I established is identifying a problem in which I feel I have a contribution, and then I have the responsibility to take the first step. And fortunately today we have so many brilliant young people. They come along, they take it, they run with it. And I will come back to this when we are talking about the African Gender Initiative, why it is so important in our times and the way it's being conceived. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And I do have to say that people should remember $1 million 29 years ago is so much more than $1 million
For a
today.
country like Mozambique.
For a country
yeah.
like Mozambique. So coming back to the initiative, first of all, I want to ask you, you established the Higher Life Foundation. You've been involved in different types of philanthropic activity. What made you want to be a part of bringing to life an African Gender Initiative?
So with Higher Life Foundation, when we established the foundation, I was also working. And what I found was, because my attention was divided, I couldn't really think through how to build an enduring structure that would help us to tackle the root problems that we were facing in Zimbabwe. So I left my job. We had already been running the foundation. I've been running it part-time for 3 years. I left my job late 90s, before some of you were born. And then I then put in place a proper structure. When I say a proper structure, I mean hired staff with skills to be able to ensure that we had a good management system, financial systems in place, and even then that we had a good database that informed us on how we're doing and how we're allocating our resources. We started in education because the orphaned and vulnerable children were the ones that were the easiest for us to get to, and also where the impact was, where we could make the most amount of impact. So it was education first. But as we looked at the needs in the country, and as the resources grew, so we fund High Life Foundation from our ongoing businesses. Some people generally will say, oh, when I retire, then I will liquidate my earnings, and then a portion of that will go to the foundation, because the need was and still is so dire. I wonder, when we talk of the 150-year gap or 142 years, 130, what was it then? And with all the interventions that we have done, maybe it was 500 years then, and now this has been reduced to 130. But the investments we began to make were more intentional and more strategic. And one of the ways we saw where we could make the most amount of impact was to identify what the government was prioritizing. Now, what I learned as an African, that we don't have the leisure of, I don't like this government, so I'm not going to do anything. I'll just watch until the government that I like comes into place. We don't have that luxury. My attitude was, let's find common ground. Forget the differences. What do we have in common, and what can we do as philanthropists to ensure that we would really have the kind of, invest in the kind of things that would give us impact, but that are connected to what the government was prioritizing. So we started working with the government more than 20 years ago, and it's nice now when you read systemic change, you need systems change, and and all the theory. We think now it's the new discoveries from McKinsey and all these writers. They got it from us because that's what we're already doing. And in terms of sectors, we grew from education, we went into health. I love the point Dr. Senait made earlier today. If we don't invest in reproductive maternal health, our investments in other areas are going to just not have the kind of impact we're looking for. So we invested in that, and then also into sustainable livelihoods, economic empowerment. So now, when I stepped back and said to myself, okay, we are taking a general lens. I come from a family of 5 girls, so I've always been conscious of the gender lens. But when I came across when I looked at the realities on the ground, the injustices, the inequalities, and just the lack of opportunity. I then realized that if I just worked with myself as an island, that I wouldn't be able, I was just scratching the surface. That I had to find other partners who are like-minded, carry the same burdens as myself, who are also looking and in ways that are much bigger than mine, more effective than mine, and also using way better tools than mine in order for us to tackle the injustices that women faced in our communities. So hence my interest in the Gender Fund, and in particular the African Gender Initiative, of which there are many initiatives as APF that we'll be looking at, but the one that we have begun to focus on, which we will have a deep dive about tomorrow, is the Gender Fund. I hope I'm not running ahead of you.
No. Please run ahead. So before I come back to you, ma'am, just catching on some of the things that you said, you highlighted that there are many organizations, etc., who have been working in this space. And I think even as we're sitting here, I know of many of the people who are here. There are women's funds here like the Urgent Action Fund, there's Prospera, the network of women's funds, there's the Association of Progressive Communications, and I have to say thank you for your work with defending women human rights defenders and making us more secure. We have had a number of initiatives around the continent, a number of organizations who do amazing work and continue to do amazing work. I know how passionate you are about collaboration rather than rivalry. Can you say a little bit more about the additive value of the AGI?
You know, as Africans, it's part of our culture to collaborate. We all, if you live in a community, you know your neighbors, you share food with your neighbors. And if you are not able to look after your own children, your neighbors help you out with looking after your own children. So collaboration for me is again part and parcel of what defines success in what we do. Now, when we look at just the size of the problems we are facing and the level of just the size of the gap, I just don't see how an attitude of me and my fund and their fund and that fund will help in any way or help us to get to be able to get the success that we are looking for, to occupy the spaces we want women to occupy. We have no choice but to work together. We have no choice to be, you know, it's audacious to raise $1 million in the time and season we're in. It's audacious what we are trying to do with the Africa Gender Initiative. But it's not enough to be audacious in the amount of funding we need to raise. We have to be audacious in the level of humility we are willing to exercise in order to support one another, to network and work and collaborate to ensure that from the weakest to the smallest organization to the largest and most sophisticated are allocated the resources that they need in order for everybody to be able to run their race and to be successful. Mm-hmm. So that's why for me collaboration.
And I think it's really important, it's really important for all of us to hear, because we get caught up in that thing of rivalry, saying my organization is better than your organization, is better than that organization. And the truth of the matter is that we're all drops in an ocean of action that needs to be taken. So the more we're able to collaborate, the more effective we'll be able to be, and the less likely that people will marginalize our real belief in changing what is happening to women on our continent. So please keep with the passion for collaboration. And going back again to the AGI, Mama Michelle, you've been working with different types of women's rights organizations, feminist organizations, networks of women. And earlier today, you were speaking about the power of ideas. Could I ask you to elaborate on that just a little bit for people?
Perhaps I can just give an example. 2008, we had the global financial crisis. And everywhere, everybody was talking about restructuring, redefining the system, and it just bothers me. I said, but all these people who are talking, where are the faces of women? And where are the voices of women in this restructuring? So I said to myself, but those who have been much more marginalized in the financial system are women. What about encouraging women, professional women, who can use the expertise to demand a space where these debates of restructuring the financial system are being held, and to make sure that the face of a woman and the voice of a woman is part of the discussion. So it's one idea. It just became as this idea, and we established the so-called New Faces, New Voices. And it was exactly for the financial system, focusing on financial system. The idea evolved. Now financial inclusion, as it is called, I mean, it's part of all of us. But it started, for us, it was really, again, a problem. We identified an idea, and now we are at a point where we have, as part of our work, the deputy governors of central banks, former and current ones, have formed, we encourage them to form a network to influence system. Why? Because they are professionals and they're powerful, really powerful. Our governor of central bank is a person who is powerful for the financial system wherever you want to go. And now they engage our networks at a country level precisely to take the realities of each country, but with the knowledge and the power they have, which is the power of knowledge and power of position in this case, to shake the financial system. And they do this because we identified that, I mean, financial inclusion for women is the first step which will allow them to access to other levels of economic empowerment. And so you are asking about power of ideas. And I come now to the African Gender Initiative. Just the idea, Titi, to say, let's establish a fund of our own as Africans, collaborating with everyone who can support. It's not about the amount of money you are going to be putting on the table now. It's about the vision of a fund of this nature, of this initiative, is going to make in the landscape of financial initiatives which are going to mobilize in future billions and billions of money to put into the hands of African women. It's a power of the idea. If you were to stay and say, okay, your own financial initiatives, you have already, I mean, a foundation. There are many other foundations. So let's go and we continue that way. You would never be able to leverage in a powerful way, in a more broader way, and even in far-reaching. So you were talking at the beginning, you are modest to say it's 5 years or 10 years. No, this is an initiative which will go, I have to tell you, my daughter, it will go beyond your lifetime. Absolutely. And that's precisely It's precisely the ability to see the potential of this kind of collaboration and mobilizing people who have, of course, they have the muscle of financial resources. And as I was saying at the beginning, a very good idea to serve other people. Definitely you'll have lots of people to support. But it started because you had the idea to acknowledge that you alone, or 10 of people alone, it's not enough for the 100 years, 100 something of gender gap which we have to. So to bring it closer, so that instead of 100, perhaps it will be 50, or it will be 20 years. You need to be audacious, as you said. You need to be able really to dream big and to say, let's start here. But this is bigger than any one of us. And because of that, we have to work together. So that's why I'm so glad. I mean, I don't know, but you remember that you should invite me. You know, it is just to, it's just to say the reach and the impact of this initiative, as I said, it goes far, very far ahead of it. And they will be saying, oh, it was in 22, a group of young, not young, I don't know whether all the young women, definitely younger than me. Yeah, so of young women who mobilize men and women, because this morning we had some people who are not women, you mobilize goodwill, expertise, and then you bring the resources. I tell you, this is a seed which is going to make a huge, huge impact. And then it comes to what I was saying at the beginning. Only when you yourself use the power of your creativity and imagination and be able to start things, then you'll have many others saying, this is something I want to be associated with. And because I want to be associated with it, it will grow beyond what you can be thinking. So I came here to say, well done, well done, well done. Yeah. And it is a bit of the $1 million in our times, which it was a seed, and now this has to be seen as a seed. But the goodwill which it's going to generate, it's far bigger, far, far, far bigger than what we are talking about today. So well done.
Thank you so much.
Well done. Well done. Well done.
Thank you. You know, I feel really inspired, and when I think of what we can do, not just people in this room. Theo said to me, Tsitsi, we need to be thinking billions of dollars.
Yeah.
If we are talking about real change. Mm-hmm. So I want to throw it to Theo and say, Theo, what's on your mind?
Yeah. Okay. So what's on my mind, really? 3 things. One is, I am really, really pleased that the idea of the AGI is something that the APF is taking up as an African-led initiative, because I'm tired of people telling us what to do. Mm-hmm. That's on my mind. But also on my mind is that it will only work if we work together. So we have the APF. We also have the African Philanthropy Network. We have the women's funds that are working on the continent. We have, and in fact, Mum, one of the things the FDC did, I think, was give a lot of other Africans confidence to start other types of foundations, whether it's the Southern African Trust, Trust Africa, the Kenyan Community Development Fund. We have powerful organizations. If we work together, we leverage change. And so that is what's on my mind, the how. How do we leverage that change? How do we move from rivalry to collaboration? But also, to go back to what Dorothy said this morning, how are we held accountable? And how can we be held accountable with grace? That when people push us or say, this philanthropy should be more visionary, it should be more radical, it should be whatever, that we have the grace to listen and use that listening for change. And also, how do we, as activists, have the grace to challenge constructively and to know that we too have to change? So those things are on my mind. But honestly, we're African women. We've been doing this for generations. I really do believe that we can raise the billions that you are envisaging and then make sure that we are working within lots of different pathways of activism and change so that we get to where we want to go together.
May I come in this idea of really we can... I don't want to be talking too loud because we are still working on it, but I just want to share a concept. We, as the Graça Machel Trust, we are at the verge of launching an initiative which is thousands, I'm not going to say the numbers, thousands of women we train, entrepreneurs, to give them really these tools and the confidence for them to grow, okay? Thousands in one cohort. And then to say, girls, you are going to get this knowledge and this expertise will provide, mentorship, whatever. In 5 years' time, the group of you has to be producing at least $1 billion of you call of revenue together. And then you have to be able to produce at least 1 million jobs. What do I say by this? So when I hear our collaboration here, all of us, of course, if in 5 years, an organization like us, which is small, and again, we don't have money, we don't have money, we just have ideas. And if we can, and we believe we can, in 5 years, with the thousands of girls, we can have 1 billion. What can't we do, all of us together, in 5 years' time? It's just, this idea of being audacious and to believe that you can do it. Because if you say, I can do it, you'll find ways of doing it, and it will come. And because you're not doing alone, precisely because you're not doing alone, you have a much better chance of doing it right when you do with other people. If you do alone, you can fail. But if you have many heads coming together, many hands working together, the chance of making mistakes, it's much less. So you will succeed. And you have to believe you're going to succeed. That's what I'm trying to say, that if all of us together, we think of Africa has to stop being always the last continent in terms of what are the challenges of the global family. And in these ideas we are discussing here, in 5 years' time, we should challenge ourselves to say, we will prove that we can do it well, quick, and respond in terms of bringing very many good impacts. Let me give another example. You see, we are being, labeled as the country, the continent which fails. But have you realized they say Africa is the continent which is at the forefront of entrepreneurship by women, right? Yet, those numbers, the big, ugly numbers, do exist. It is not a lie. But there is a very strong power which is emerging to the point, regardless of being all those things, we are #1 in developing women entrepreneurship. What can stop us then? What can stop us then? So that's the idea of combining what we can think and think ahead, our collective capacity to do things, and you can see it's quite rightly in collaboration. Girls, we can do it. Yes. I'm just telling you, we can do it. And we have to prove this. We have to prove to ourselves we can do it. And we have really a challenge to ourselves, to our daughters, who are your daughters, who are my grandchildren. We have to break this cycle. This cycle has to be broken. And we just have to continue with this kind of creativity. So, again, well done. And I see they're telling you that
they're telling us to get off stage. I could talk to them for another hour, but we won't.
Yes.
So, just one last thing, Titsi. What's the message you want to give to people here before we step off of this stage?
To be honest with you, what is running through my mind is there's something somebody mentioned, that we need to be very good listeners. We have a deep dive session tomorrow at 7:15. I know all of you will be wide awake, rearing to go. And I'm saying to myself, if we listen carefully, the team that is doing the deep dive, we may have to tear up our agenda and really have a conversation that will enable us to come out with a refined interpretation of the kind of ideas that we are harvesting today, and we'll harvest some more tomorrow, so that the solutions we come up with are not what we prescribed before we came to the meeting, but really born out of the expression of our passions, our aspirations, and our hope.
Thank you. And so, before I thank these two amazing women properly, I want you all to thank yourselves. I want you to thank yourselves for being activists, for believing in gender equality, for believing that justice and equity is something that our continent can re-establish. And I say re, because we know that we've been there before. Thank you to all of you. And then finally, I would very much like you to join me in thanking these absolutely amazing, inspirational women, because if nothing else, anyone who listens to them speak understands that that narrative of African women being victims, rubbish. So please, give us a hand for these amazing African women leaders.
Thank you. Thank you.
On behalf of the Rockefeller Foundation. On behalf of the Rockefeller Foundation, I want to congratulate the African Philanthropy Forum and its partners on the launch of the Africa Gender Initiative. This initiative couldn't be more important or more timely. The crises facing Africa, including a food crisis, an energy crisis, and a debt crisis, and the crises from COVID-19 and climate change, are all disproportionately impacting Africa's women and Africa's girls. In developing solutions designed by Africans for Africans, this initiative will empower women and girls to meet those challenges. It will also advance gender equity and strengthen women's leadership throughout the continent. Co-Impact shares those same goals, which is why they launched their Gender Fund earlier this year. And today, we're proud to stand with the APF, Co-Impact, and so many other partners at this new beginning for African women and girls. We look forward to see what comes next. Congratulations.
Responsibility and vision. Your Excellency, Ms. Gracia Machel, thank you. Our chair, Mrs. Tsitsi Masiwa, thank you. Theo, thank you. I'm sure we all felt it was brilliant how you extracted all of those gems and all of that information and all of that learning from both Mrs. Tsitsi Masiwa and Her Excellency, Ms. Gracia Machel. Allow me to say, ladies and gentlemen, as I sat there and listened, I felt it was really ironic that both of their journeys didn't actually start with money. They started with heart. And I still have this vivid picture of the expression that Ms. Gracia Machel made when she said, I felt something here. I still have that vision. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I think a lot of the time we underestimate the human functions and the power within us ourselves as human beings in being compelled to take part in such initiatives. It's about heart. And maybe the question is, have you been touched? Has your heart been touched this evening? Has it? You're free to answer. Has your heart been touched this evening? Absolutely brilliant. That was you signing up for the deep dive we have tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock, where we will be unpacking all matters around the Africa Gender Initiative. We do look forward to seeing you there bright and early. And I think, again, we're in a situation now where earlier speakers have spoken about listening, and that's something we have been doing. And so that session will be fully packed and unpacked for your benefit. So, ladies and gentlemen, now that our minds have been fed and enriched by the priceless conversations that have been taking place, it is now time to feed our stomachs. Ladies and gentlemen, dinner is served.
The world changes, revolutionary